Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland, Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland, Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by Justin Cooper. Justin is the co-founder and general manager of Community Motors, a motor vehicle social enterprise aiming to serve the local community whilst creating opportunities for young people and those from disadvantaged groups. What's unique about Community Motors is how all profits are ploughed back into the organisation, allowing them to provide more services to their customers whilst offering young people the chance to gain real-world experience in a professional working environment. And be sure to listen to the end, where Justin shares with us a generous offer to help you ensure your car is safe and winter ready. So whether you're interested in knowing more about the world of community interest companies, or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. Welcome, Justin Cooper, to the Inside Kingston Podcast. Justin, I'm really excited about this conversation because I think what you guys are doing there at Community Motors really embodies this motto of doing well by doing good. And I think that myself and our listeners can learn a lot from your experience in this area. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time if that's okay. So Justin, where did you grow up?
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Anyway, first of all, Amir, thank you for having me on this. Looking forward to sharing what we're about and a bit of my own journey. I was born in Tottenham, so yes, I'm a Tottenham supporter for my sins. And we've always my family lived in North London. I went to school up there. I then went to university in Cambridge. And then after that, I moved south of the river, which was a bit of a shock for everybody, but we all survived. Initially started working in consultancy, or actually accountancy. So Arthur Andersen, for those with long memories, when there used to be a big 7 or big 8 accounting companies, went into the consultancy division. Computers, when computers were still new, before the internet was a thing, which my kids don't believe that there was a time before the internet was a thing, but there was a time. And from there, moved into finance, particularly asset finance, leasing, hire purchase. And then after a while, 3 of us who worked there got fed up with the big corporate culture, and we moved on and we set up our own organisation. There was me, Cooper, C. There was a Mr. H and a Mr. P. So with a complete lack of imagination you'd expect from a bunch of IT people, we called it CHP Consulting. And we set off with an idea of developing software in a particular market, again in the leasing market. We did well. We got lucky. We had the right product at the right time. We grew and we grew, that it's still going now. It's now called Alpha. It's a listed company. With them, I went to America. My family and I moved out to America. We set up our American operation, and we had bases in Australia and elsewhere in Europe. It continues to grow. But about probably 10 years ago, I took the opportunity to step away. I delegated myself out of a job in that I delegated all my UK responsibilities before I moved to the US. And then we set up the operation there, had some clients there. And as a family, we thought it was time to come home, fairly young kids at the time. So I delegated my responsibilities there and came back to the UK with pretty much nothing to do. And lots of excellent young people who were doing the jobs I had been doing. And I could either have taken them back on, or else it's time to step away and do something else. So I took that opportunity.
So as the best management consultants do, you manage to make yourself redundant at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. And there's quite a few threads in that I want to pull with you throughout this conversation, Justin. But one in particular is, and look, I don't profess to understand about the sort of systems that you were consulting on and building, but for the benefit of our listeners, I think it's interesting just as a geeky point, so to speak, especially when it comes to sort of the leasing and the finance side of vehicles. You are building systems that are probably pretty math heavy, aren't they? They are looking at different finance options that are out there, and also different vehicle stocks that are out there, and mix matching them both for the search that particular client is querying about on your system.
Yep.
So it's pretty intensive problem solving, logistical sort of back office systems. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, it is back office and front office.
Oh, right.
So if you had gone and bought a Nissan car in the I guess the 1990s, then from the moment you talked to a finance guy about leasing it or hire purchase, from then on you'd have been within our systems. So it'd been our systems that would found the car, added the options, figured out the price, added on the exorbitant salesman commission, and then from there gone into the back end, collected the direct debits, dealt with any arrears, sent all the paperwork out, produced the reports, dealt with all the end of life stuff and the options at the end of the life of that. So we're leasing on our systems. People were leasing Nissan Micras, but also shopping centres and construction sites and dams and submarines. So it still is a very all-encompassing bit of software.
That's really interesting.
And although the software is clever, and yes, there is some quite clever maths in there going on. Often the biggest problem is getting a customer from point A to point B. And so from a consultancy point of view, it's yes, you want to sell the bells and whistles and the software, but it's all about can those people in that company use it to best effect? Can it transform what they're doing in a good way and make them more effective and not just more efficient, not just doing the same thing quicker, but actually more effective in what they're doing as an organisation.
Well, and it's really interesting you say that way, because, of course, you then go from being a management consultant in a company like that to setting up, alongside your wife, a community interest company in Community Motors. So to bring this conversation a little bit more to the present, could you tell us a little bit more about this business today? Ooh,
where we're at today. Okay, so what we are simplistically, we're a garage. If you go down Red Line Road, just behind the big childcare centre, and before you get to Tolworth Girls' School, there's a little industrial park there, business park, and one of the bigger units in there is Community Motors. And it's a garage, and we fix cars, and we do MOTs, and we do servicing and repairs and all the things you'd expect. But the reason it exists, and what we do alongside servicing customers, is we offer training to young people, young and disadvantaged people, but typically young people who are basically not getting on with academic education. So we're talking about kids sometimes in special needs schools, certainly in pupil referral units, so kids have already dropped out. Or I guess our sweet spot is kids who are in mainstream schools but just aren't hacking it. They're not going to university, that's not what they want to do. And we can offer them hands-on training where they can really see what they're doing, really see the effect they're having, and do that in the garage alongside lots of mechanics who are working on real customer cars. So it's a work experience, and it's a training, and it ends up with an accredited qualification that they can then take elsewhere and go on and use it, or do related things, or just be invited into the world of work.
Yeah, and what I love about the way you set this up is it seems to me that just like you did with your previous role in this business as well, if I can call it that, this community interest company, you guys seem to care about things that I think maybe other garages either are missing the trick or they just don't care about. Right. So one is this being a thing in the community that can train people who don't want to go down an academic track to find themselves a professional track. I think that is brilliant and to be applauded. Right. Secondly, when doing a little bit of research for this conversation, you guys also pay attention to breaking down what you do in really basic English for everyone to be able to understand and feel comfortable with. So much so, Justin, that am I right in saying you guys actually have a badge that sort of says that your garage is
and I'm going to get this wrong, but it's something like it's women friendly. In other words, look, it's not because you're a woman or even a guy who doesn't care about cars. It's we're not going to rip you off because you come in that stance. Am I right in saying that?
Oh yeah, that's one thing, and I'll talk about that. But trying to be better than an average garage, sadly, isn't hard. Garages have a terrible, terrible reputation, and people don't trust them typically. They expect to get ripped off. And there's a terrible statistic. I think it's something like if a woman goes alone into a garage, something like 70% of the time, she'll make a point of mentioning a husband or a boyfriend because she's frightened that they're going to be ripped off or going to talk over her or not listen to her or whatever it is. And that's terrible. So regardless of who the customer is, absolutely, we want to explain to them what we're doing because we absolutely believe that yes, we want to make money and we need to charge people for what we're doing, but people take their cars in because they want them to work well and keep working well and be safe, and fulfill all the regulations. And that has to happen, and you can do that well or less well. You can explain what you're doing well or less well. You can treat your customer and your staff and the environment better or less well. We believe this. If cars are well maintained, yes, they're still polluting, but the better maintained they are, the less they pollute. And all the waste products that come out of servicing a car, the waste oil and all the waste parts, the filters and the electrical parts and the mechanical parts, we make sure we recycle all of those in a way that takes time and costs money, but is the right thing to do. We look after our staff. We make sure they come in as trained people, but we would always try and train them up more, both on the front desk and in the mechanics.
Yeah.
Because it's the right thing to do, and I guess it's the Richard Branson approach of train them well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough so they want to stay.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And in our company, we definitely live by a very similar motto in that sense. I do quite a lot of work in financial planning for divorcees. And typically when I'm referred by the solicitor to the divorcee, I'm there trying to build a case or helping represent the woman side of things. And I always just put myself in like my wife's shoes or my mum's shoes or my sister's shoes or my own daughter's shoes and think, if a situation like that happened with them, how would I like them to be treated? And it's when you put yourself in that mindset, you become a better professional. I'll give you an example. I've had an opportunity to take. I don't understand a lot about cars. I love cars, but I don't understand much about it. So I'll be prime for being ripped off because I don't really understand what it's all about, and I don't have an interest to learn about the nuts and bolts of an engine. But when you get a chance to talk to a mechanic and they just, in plain English, explain to you what they did, what was going on, you just feel a lot more confident. And I'll go as far as saying this: I think the mechanic feels a lot more fulfilled about his role because he's thinking, not only am I doing the actual technical thing I'm trained to do, but I'm imparting a sense of empathy or confidence into this customer, which will mean they'll probably become repeat customers anyway.
We very much want to have a really a small organisation. We want to have a single layer organisation. So absolutely, so the mechanic is not only capable of but wants to talk to the customer if that would be helpful. Many, I guess, the bigger dealerships and the bigger car companies want to keep things separate because that's the most efficient in terms of getting things done quickly. But it doesn't necessarily produce the best result for the customer. Absolutely. We'll. I think our watchword in terms of dealing with the customer is yes. How would you want to be dealt with yourself? So if more than once we've had cars come in where we'll look at it and there's a lot of work needs doing to it, and we could, if one was less scrupulous, which sadly many garages are, you could eke it out and you could do a bit here and a bit here and a bit there and charge them thousands of pounds for all things that need doing. Whereas actually the right thing to do is say to that customer, it's going to be thousands of pounds, the car's not worth it, take it away, sell it, scrap it, get a new one. And we will do that to customers. And that's kind of cutting our nose off to spite our face in terms of finances, but that's about building that relationship with the customer, having that integrity, doing the right thing. And long term, we believe that's also the right thing for business as well as the right thing in some absolute way of integrity.
Yeah, huge. I definitely strongly second that. Justin, what is it that prompted you and your wife to go about setting Community Motors as a social enterprise and, again, focusing on this business of also offering young people a chance to, frankly, gain real-world experience in a professional working environment?
Well, that's where it came from. Was that second thing about trying to offer opportunities to young people who otherwise wouldn't have them. And I think it certainly partly comes from my wife and I, our Christian faith, and the idea that we should be trying to do this sort of thing. But I think particular revelation for me was the fact that I spent all my career working in the city. I've worked with bright young people, got degrees, they're really clever. They're always going to find a job. They're going to do well. And absolutely, when I was at CHP, I believe that the right thing to do was make the best we could with them and develop them and bring them on in their own sphere, and that's brilliant. But they've got lots of opportunities. And then you come across the guys who are in the pupil referral units, the people who are just never go to university. And it was obvious, if you look at it even slightly, that the pendulum was swinging in education towards exams, towards O levels being show my age, GCSEs being the be all and end all, and vocational qualifications were being de-emphasised. It was all about academic qualifications, and I guess probably from the Blair government onwards, it was all about going to university. That was what you put in front of young people. And little thought seemed to be given to just the waste of the resources in this country and the talent that we have got in those young people. What happens to them who they're not going to university? And that just seemed like a terrible crime to us that was happening. Now, we can't fix the whole thing. We don't want to get involved in policy or politics. But we thought, in our own way, could we set up a proper social enterprise, something that makes enough money to keep itself going, but also offers some real tangible opportunities to young people who aren't going to go to university, who aren't going to do well with GCSEs.
I bet that's pretty fulfilling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really hard work. Don't underestimate it. It's treading where people haven't trod before, because there's no model to follow. But when you see some of the young people come through, kids who's probably their aspiration is often do nothing, pop star, obviously. Or if they're a bit more realistic, drug dealer. And that sounds terrible in leafy Kingston and Surbiton, that's what the kids are looking forward to. But they see that in their areas they're living in, and there are many areas around Kingston where that's still the case. And they see people who are making lots of money, apparently pretty risk-free, without needing education. It's like, well, that sounds like a good career to me. Why shouldn't I go down that route? So just opening their eyes to the idea that actually there are other opportunities. There are things you can learn to do that are fulfilling and can make you a decent salary and can allow you to grow up and be a sort of a member of society and stand on your own 2 feet. Yeah. So when you see that happening, we've been going for sort of 5 years now of kids coming through, and a few of them come back, and you see they're now doing an apprenticeship here. Or one's working in air conditioning, has got a job there. One is working as a caretaker. It's like, great, they've got a job. They're doing something that they are fulfilling some of their promise, as opposed to just being wasted and doing nothing.
Yeah, that's huge. And Justin, how can people support the company apart from just patronising it with taking their cars, their vans, or their vehicles over to it? Are there any other ways that folks listening can make other young people maybe aware that you guys exist and that training opportunities do exist within the firm and things like that?
Let me come at that a slightly different way. The big problem in education currently, as far as vocational training is concerned, is that all the incentives for a school are towards getting them through GCSEs. That's what the lead takers monitor, that's what they get paid on, basically. So all the incentives are pushed that way. So even getting in front of schools and saying, hello, we're Community Motors, we have an offer for you that we think would really work for some of your young people, it's been really hard. And they get a million emails offering them all sorts of things, and I understand that. And here we're saying, yes, we exist. And we've certainly had a number of times when a teacher has heard about us through word of mouth, and then they come and see us and say, why have I never heard about you before? And at which point we say, well, here's the 3 letters we sent you, here's the 20 emails we sent you, and they just clearly haven't got time to look at them. So gossiping about us in a good way in those academic circles, if you've got those connections, that would be great. I'd love people to do that. if people have got time and are interested in vehicles and want to volunteer, we've done that before. We can do that again. That can be really helpful. Just having another pair of hands around, particularly, I guess, this coming year as we start growing again. It's been really quiet this year, and we've been doing individual tuition by and large. But yeah, when we have groups come in, having somebody else as a spare pair of hands, who's a safe pair of hands, is handy. But I think other than that, yeah, it's come along. Use our services, and use our services because we're a brilliant garage, but also because you support what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I love it. Let me switch gears on you slightly, if I may, Justin.
Okay.
And I wanted to sort of pick your brains.
Sorry, was that a motoring joke, by the way, or was that?
No, but hey, I'll take the compliment if it was a good one. Look, we're still a ways off from autumn, let alone from winter. But I think it's pretty well known that cars break down a lot more likely in the winter than they do in the summer. So for folks listening to this and thinking, you know what, next time my MOT come around or I need to do a service on my car, I actually want to try out Community Motors. Is there any service that you guys offer to perhaps get people just a feel for the services? Do you offer any sort of winter checklists or anything like that might help the customer start getting a feel for your business and your team?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah. We all through the year we offer just what we call a visual health check, which is looking over the whole car and a basic check. Is it in decent shape? And that costs a bit of money, but not much. But as it comes to winter, we often offer and we will be offering this year, a winter health check as a free service, just to see the basic things that might go wrong. And we're talking batteries, tyres, windscreen wipers, fluids. That's most of it. And they're all stuff actually you can check yourself. And if somebody wants to come to us and say, look, can you show me what you're checking? Absolutely, we want to do that. We want to educate people in those things. Because most of the things, you're right, cars do break down more in the winter, but they're mostly predictable and avoidable. It's not hard to check your own tyre pressures and pump them up. It's not hard to make sure your windscreen wipers are working. Changing them might be a bit difficult. You want your lights to work, obviously. Tyres, a bit harder to check, but again, there's little tricks with like 20p pieces and things that will help you sort of figure out is the tread good enough. But we'll do all that. Those things are again safety matters. You don't want to be broken down the side of the road in the snow, but you don't want to be doing that any time of the year. And I guess particularly right now, we are seeing cars that have been essentially off the road for a number of months during the pandemic and are starting to come back on. And it's a testimony to how good cars are. People expect to be able to walk up to it, turn the key or press the button, and it just works. And sometimes it doesn't. And we've had quite a few of those calls where we've had to sort of help somebody out, fit a new battery, get them up and running. But yeah, no, absolutely. Come winter, come for a free health check, but right now, come for any health check. So come for your MOT, and as part of that, we'll absolutely advise you, what else might need doing. And I don't want to claim we're really special, because what any good garage should do, but we think we do it consistently, we do it with integrity, so we won't sell you stuff you don't need. We'll tell you roughly how long things will last for. It's not rocket science, but just doing things right, we think, as I say, is the right thing to do.
Justin, I'm still really impressed with the way Community Motors have set out to give young people from maybe a disadvantaged background or disadvantaged route in life a start into finding their own pathway to become a professional, to have a skill, to have a trade that they can then take with them to become like fully immersive members of society. And with that in mind, I just wondered if you could maybe share with us some of the stories that you have seen grow up inside Community Motors, so our listeners can get a real sense of what doing well by doing good really means.
Yeah, sure. I can think immediately of a number of young people. Actually, I should start by saying it's almost all guys, almost all blokes. I wish it wasn't. We've had literally a handful of girls come through. I wish we could break that down and actually it not be that mechanics is a boys' trade. But anyway, that aside, we've had quite a few guys come through who they come to us and we do the induction and they come to us regularly and they seem to be enjoying it and learning from it. And then as time goes by, we find out that actually that's all they're coming to. That they're refusing school or pupil referral unit or whatever it is entirely. And that really shows me how, what a big draw it is and how interested people can be in things where they can achieve stuff and do stuff with their hands. So actually see something working at the end of it that wasn't working before. That's been really good. And we've had one guy in particular, I remember, who was only coming to us. He was arriving a bit late. He was supposed to be there at 9. He was there about 9:30, sometimes even 10 o'clock. And then he'd go home later on in the afternoon. And again, only later on did we find out that actually when he went home, he was then the only person in that household who was awake. Nobody else had woken up at that stage because he was in the third generation unemployed. And nobody else, so he had no examples, no role models to work from. So we were able to give him at least a bit of a role model of actually you can do this and you can do something productive. And part of the reason it works is that the guys he's working with, the technicians who do some of the training and the training manager who does most of it, have all had a similar background. And they've been through that. So it's not me, Cambridge educated academics standing up and telling them this is a good thing. It's blokes who've done it and who are living it and have moved on and have got kids and have grown up and are doing the real thing. And that's just a great example that it's possible to do it.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah. And then it also depends who we got coming through. So for some, it's a route that isn't drug dealing. But we do get a group in, or two groups in, from St Philip's School in Chessington, which is a special needs school. And for them, it's more about physical achievement. And they arrive at the start of the year and they can't pick a spanner up. They don't know one end of it for another. They couldn't undo something. By the end of the year, they're putting cars on ramps, they're lifting them up, they're taking wheels off, they're changing tyres, and they're fully confident in that. And so the physical dexterity and the opportunity to actually deal with really big machinery and that sort of sense of power and control and motivation that comes with it is huge. And it's just really hard for a school to do that. I appreciate that. And so we work really well with St Philip's on that, and it's been a great relationship, and hopefully long will it continue.
That's so cool, and definitely may it continue for a long time indeed.
Yeah.
Justin, what are some of the key business lessons that you've learned throughout your life?
I think probably the most important thing is the people you travel with. That whether you're recruiting them or working as part of a team, that actually really putting effort into that to find the right people, and then once you're with them, to develop them and let them develop you, I think is probably the most important thing in any sort of career journey. I think probably the other thing is that education of any sort is never wasted. So I came into community motors, with a couple of degrees, but I'd be learning stuff every day about how cars work and how these guys fix them, and what their thought processes are and what you need to know to fix a modern car. A modern car has 20 or 30 computers in it. This isn't an easy job to diagnose this stuff. It isn't just plug it in or gives you the answer, swap some parts on, it's done. Even swapping the parts can be really complicated because it's one thing when the car is built in a factory, but then swapping them over and finding the right one to change and doing it right once the car is all together and it's covered in muck and nothing is accessible is a skill in itself. Just learning that for me has been great. Constant education is always worthwhile. Really good.
And when you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
Well, on the people front, I'm really proud of the people that I've worked with and I think I've been part of developing. Both community motors now, and that's obviously fairly new and young, and I see stuff going through there, and I see people who work with us and have moved on. We've just about to take on our fifth apprentice, which for a small organisation is quite a lot. But again, I've seen two of those have already left us and gone on to other things, and that's great to see that happening. But from previous lives, the guys who I've worked with and hopefully helped develop. I don't know if you come across Starling Bank.
Yeah.
Starling Bank, one of the challenger banks. Their IT systems were built from scratch from three guys who I worked with at CHP and watched them grow, and now they've got us to do that. And it's like, wow. There's an app in my hand that's come from blokes who I work with and hopefully help them grow. That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And I know you mentioned COVID affected your business, that has affected most businesses over these last 15, 16 months or so. But what next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
I think so. On the training side and the young people side, it's getting back to where we want to be, and our model works best if we can have 4, 5, 6 guys at a time. But that probably means from different schools. Now, obviously, that hasn't been possible up till now because that's crossing bubbles and you can't do that. So we're hoping that will become possible again next year because that gives us more efficiency. And it also tends to lead to better working relationships because then means the guys who are coming together know each other only from work and they build a working relationship rather than a historical, which gang are you in and which area you're from, what school you're from. So hopefully the growth in that will be good. We've had some more schools who've been in contact with us and they're interested, and hopefully that we can turn that into working with them again more in the future. On the garage side, technology keeps moving on. In terms of what's in a particular car, obviously is electric vehicles, hybrid electric vehicles. We think we're pretty well geared up for that. We think we're one of the first garages in the country to have all our technicians trained on electric vehicles. Wow. We've installed a charge point outside that we can use for our customers, but also for the public outside of working hours. We've got, we think, most of the gear we need to work on electric vehicles. So we see that, I don't know, what's the word? Exciting, challenging, all those good words, opportunity, hard.
Definitely exciting times ahead. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Very cool. So Justin, as we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in.
Okay.
So what do you do to relax outside of the office?
As a bit of background, the reason I got into Community Motors, or the reason that's the solution I came up with for offering opportunities to young people in practical things, is that I've always liked classic motorbikes. So probably that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, is in the winter fixing them and in the summer riding them.
Yeah, I've got a big soft spot for classic motorbikes. My dad has always been a massive fan, especially British classic motorbikes. So kindred spirits there.
Yeah, well, I have two Triumph Bonnevilles. So
lovely. Lovely, yeah. Are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, slightly left field, I think. I've got a number of business books and things on the go, but one that I've got it here to remind me, that my daughter gave me for Christmas, and both my kids are now grown up enough to buy me books, and I never quite know what they're going to get, but they're always interesting, and they quite deliberately go a bit left field. And this one called Just Us by Claudia Rankine, and she is American, it's based in America, but it's an exploration of whiteness and white privilege and how it's seen from a black point of view, and it's a bit of a mishmash of things. It's poetry and it's essays and it's letters, but it really makes you think, and it really helps you understand how I guess the white privilege world looks like from the black point of view. Some of it is very American, and you think, oh, that would never happen here, but the principles are still the same. And for me, that's been quite an important part of, I guess, of my journey of trying to understand a bit more about marginalised groups and about the black community.
Really cool. And are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Lowbrow, definitely lowbrow. Marvel, I've really enjoyed during lockdown. The Disney Plus has had the Marvel series coming out, so Loki is my current thing. Yeah. But if you're looking a little bit classier, probably Nomadland, the movie. Very good. And the fact that it was filmed using the real people from the story as most of the actors, you both realised and didn't realise as you're watching it. It felt very real, and then you realise at the end, it was real. So that's a great movie. I recommend that. I strongly second that movie.
And finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
Well, www.communitymotors.org is a great place to start. Obviously, we're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, but the website is still where we find most people go to. Or just rock up at Unit 22 Red Lion Business Park, and we'll be glad to see you and offer you advice and take a look at your car.
And for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure that I add that link to the show notes.
That'd be great.
Justin, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Take care.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating.
We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.